Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for my MSI player tier list. When it comes to MSI, there's not a lot of players, but I think it still opens up a very interesting discussion. Just to preface everything, the main things that I'm looking at in terms of judging a player is lane phase slash pathing, of course, when it comes to jungle. Effective champion pool, meaning like if they pick it, do they play well? Like just because you pick it and win doesn't mean necessarily that you're good at it. Macro understanding, which just is an extension of it's like understanding like which waves you can farm, which waves you can't farm, adjusting to game states and map states, and understanding when you're strong and when you're weak, when you should farm, when you can farm, how you create pressure on the map, and how you just your general movement and how you read information, which is very intricate, right? Because it's a team thing, but sometimes you notice details and sometimes you don't. And we try to assess that. And then finally, just team fighting, team fighting, how you set up for team fights. Like the Zeus flank is a common one, or let's say the owner smite steals, like the 369, how he plays tanks. These are notable details that you can extend to other players too, right? Finally, as well, I guess there's an element of like the intangible that we should try to evaluate because I think that it is very hard to break through in an international tournament. Usually, the same names manage to do it. I don't necessarily say that someone's a choker or someone's not a choker because I think that's such a bad conversation. It's more about like the consistency of being able to find form when it comes to crunch time. I think that T1 is a good example of that. When they are playing at the international tournaments and there is a set amount of opponents and they need to figure out a specific set of meta. They are stronger. 369 internationally performs good. Keen maybe is a player that has performed internationally worse, even though regionally he's been performing really, really well. There's these details too, of course, that are harder to measure, but maybe in my selection you can see some of my personal bias in that because obviously this is my tier list, so it will be biased in my direction. And of course, any opinion is biased towards my own belief and what I focus on as important. But enough about that. You guys want to know what's what. So, in regards to top lane, the first two names, the two names that I'm evaluating for the best top laner coming into this tournament is 369 and Keen. So the main thing for the argument for 369, I think there's been a lot of games this season where where he has had to do a lot. I think that his Aatrox games and his Renekton games are the one that stands out. I think that the top four players at this tournament, in regards to the top lane, they're all playing like a very, very mean K'Sante. So I think that's something that they all have in their back pocket. I think 369 was a little bit alone in that when it came to, of course, the previous year. But now it feels like everyone's caught on in terms of the understanding and how to create impact with K'Sante. I think that, 369 has shown a range. He showed the Jace, he showed Urgot gameplay, and he also showed a Rumble, which are all things that can be said for, of course, Keen as well. Keen has had a very, very solid split in regards to his gameplay. I think that his finals was super impressive. People talk about K'Sante nerf, but the thing is, K'Sante did get nerfed a couple of times, and I don't want to take anything away from him. I think his Rumble is super strong. His Twisted Fate is super impressive too. And I think that the main thing, right, the main thing is, for me, when I look at top esports and Gen G in terms of how much weight need to be carried from their individual positions, I do think that 369 has just done a little bit more. And that could be a situation where you're a victim of your circumstances. Like, do I blame Keen for having CHOVY on his team? Not necessarily, but there's been many games where 369 just really, really stood tall and had enormous impact when it came to top esports run, of course, all the way to the finals. So I am leaning towards 369 to put him at the top. No, I think in terms of being complete as a player, I do think 369 has just had a wonderful split. I think also in terms of the experience that he carries over from previous tournaments, being, of course, a player that has won MSI previously, I think that also carries weight coming into this tournament. He is a player that is defending his title in one way, right? But 369 to me, I don't see necessarily holes in the way he drafts right now. And I think this is a player that can also adjust super well in a situation where the lane swap meta occurs and happens. It is something that Top Esports pulled off against JDG, of course. So I think 369 is just the most complete player. And I think, additional thing that I didn't mention in terms of what I should have mentioned in the preface is just the meta is not going to change super much unless a team figures out a way to break the meta, which is hard for me to predict, right? I expect we're going to see a lot of the same, right? Rek'Sai is nerfed, but in regards to the rest of the champions, I do think we're going to see K'Sante, Aatrox, Rumble, TF, the usual suspects that did not get nerfed. So I think 369 should be up there, and then I'm going to put Keen right behind them. The order matters here. I think Keen, like the main difference when it comes to Keen, Zeus, and additionally Bin, I think just I think Keen in a meta that allows you to play the same rotating champions over and over again. I think this is a meta that is very good for 369. That is very good for Keen. I think Zeus as a player, he is an outlier in the top 4 here in the sense that he does indeed enjoy playing the likes of, for example, Vayne, right? There was an obsession with Twisted Fate that they had. They had the Aatrox Demon run. Zeus as a player, I think that when he is supposed to farm and he plays in isolation and he is allowed to generate gold, he's very good at carrying games. But if the game state differs and he needs to play a little bit more of a defensive role, or he needs to play a role that needs to cross through mid to create space, and his role is a lot more dynamic than the one that gets to farm on side because Korea and Gumayushi and Owner are just dominating the map, I think this is where Zeus struggles. In terms of how much he dies in general on side, this is something that is a highlight of T1's pain point. I think T1's pain point, when they struggle, it is when their bot lane don't have the capacity to get ahead. When they are not allowed to get ahead, they can't dominate around mid in the mid game as hard as they do. Because the extension of that is that Owner and Zeus then have freedom to farm and to create situations where they can carry the game, because this is something that they are very, very good at. But when that breaks apart and they can't pressure through mid, this is where Zeus often dies on side. He dies on side, he dies on side. I think in a lot of cases, FAKER is the one doing the dirty work because he's stealing waves, grabbing attention to himself. He is kind of finding his rhythm in a scenario where all of these youngsters around him want to just play very, very freely, and FAKER has to play very structured because he has to solve game situations on his own. So this is an attribute that I really appreciate when it comes to FAKER. But you can notice in T1's worst games when it falls apart, it is in situations where they can't pressure through bottom side, and that bleeds into everything else too. Okay? So when it comes to Zeus, I think that Bin as a player, I think that he's a little bit more adaptable when it comes to those game states. I think that Bin, is on a team that is a lot more standard in the way that they can play games, and I think they're a lot more flexible in terms of game states. I think T1 as a team, they are very fucking good at what they do good, which is like Nash pressure, dominating through bottom side, Drake setups, farming side when they have information to do so. These are things that T1 does super, super well. But when parts of this is missing and Korea doesn't find the champion to break apart enemy bot lane, and he has to play more standard champions to kind of fulfill the purpose of the draft, or Owner doesn't find the right champion to fill in the holes that a Zeus pick is going to give or a career pick is going to give, this is where T1 look worse, right? It's like the more complete teams like Genji, Bilibili, they can fit the roles of that are necessary for a team composition in multiple positions. While most of the time in T1, the people that need to do the dirty work is mid and jungle, right? This bleeds into a discussion of like how important like a champion like Rel is for a team like T1, but we're talking about top laners here, so I don't want to stray too far. So I think that Zeus, when he's playing the champions like the Vayne and so forth, is super, super good. He has had some solid K'Sante games. Maybe this is something that they fall back on. But in a world where I have set expectations on the meta, I think that I have to put Zeus fourth here in the pool of like the top 4, because the top 4 is much better than the Western ones. But the difference here, just to keep in mind, is very minimal. You know, on the right day, this can move up quick and this can change quick. I think that Bin, you know, even though he's a fantastic player, I don't think that he's had like a crazy good split. I think in some shape or form, I think Bin has also gone through the same circumstances Keen, you know, and having, you know, just the, let's say, opportunity to coast a little bit more because of how strong the team is around him, but you can't really fault him for that, you know. I think Bin has that carry potential too. It's clear he misses the Jax champion, you know. He still plays the other champs. I think his Rumbles are awful. His Rumble lane phase could be better too. There is some holes there in terms of calling Bin as complete as the likes of Keen and 369. So the main question for me here is which one do I put here? It's just a question of flavoring. You know, I think Bin is a player that finds ways to be effective in games that aren't about him, and where games where he doesn't get space, and I think this is where Zeus falters. But this is a question of flavor, so I wouldn't mind if someone put Zeus ahead of Bin here. Okay, now for the Westerners. I think to some degree, you know, I think that Bwipo, BB, Impact, I think that they are of similar level. I would put Oscarinin below them. I think that Impact, I think what he does so well, I think that he is a very, very strong role player. I think that he's insanely robust when it comes to lane phase. I think that he sets up very good traps in terms of how he sets up his lane. And I think he understands very well how to connect with his teammates. This is a top laner that knows how to, like, I don't want to make this pun, but he knows how to impact games. And I really appreciate that, you know? I think that makes Impact, you know, a legend, you know? He's like a GOAT in this regard when it comes to NA top lane gameplay. It's just, he is insanely consistent. And I appreciate this detail about him. I think regionally, something that BB does well is his team fights. And I think that in terms of just overall champion pool, when it comes to, you know, like the idea of, you know, breaking the meta somehow. You know, the main knock towards BB here is the fact that this guy has been playing a lot of lane swap games, right? So I'm looking at BB through maybe rose-tinted glasses because I'm remembering those moments where, you know, for example, in winter, deeper into winter, he did super, super well. And at the same time, I could admit that NALCS, I haven't watched a lot of the games besides like the playoff best of fives with Impact and Bwipo in them. So we take that with a grain of salt. I will put BB ahead here. It is sometimes harder to judge, but because I do think there is a sense of top lane competition that you need to account for here. I think Bwipo as a player, you know, the main thing for me here, why I consider putting Bwipo even higher is I think Bwipo, when it comes to preparing for international events, I think that he does a damn good job, you know? He does a fantastic job. He does a damn good job getting ready and, you know, getting psyched up. And just the bootcamp experience is something that does wonders for Bwipo. I can't recall an international tournament where Bwipo doesn't compete with the best. Someone's going to mention, you know, that he got solo killed by Sion, blah, 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 as Ornn or the other side. I don't remember which one it was. But he, you know, in that series, he played pretty damn solid, you know. I think when he played jungle, I think that his first MSI was solid. You know, I think maybe his Camille games weren't the greatest, but I think when it comes to the experience of ramping up as a player, Whippo really has great experience here, you know, and I think that's valid to bring up. And on the flip side, that's something that could be a knock towards Keen too, right here, because in terms of Keen's international experience, it doesn't leave a lot of room for excitement, you know? So that's like the main knock for Keen here. And I could definitely see a world where on a different moment, different day, I move Keen down. I have been quite impressed with Keen, and I think just in regards to this specific meta, I can see that he does very, very well because he hits the marks that I care about. It's very strong lane phase, strong effective champion pool, good macro understanding, and very solid team fighting, you know? I think maybe the team fighting aspect is where Bin and Zeus can do better than him. I think that they are more creative in terms of like breaking the damn game. But that doesn't mean Keen is a bad team fight, because we remember games as his Kisante and his Rumble, where he just cuts the enemy team in half with a beautiful Rumble ult. Probably like the strongest Rumble player on this list. But okay, I'm pretty happy here. Let me know what you think. I think, you know, I'm trying to skim past if there's anything else that I would like to highlight. I think that, as mentioned before, you know, 369 on Top Esports has had to carry a lot of weight. You know, he's been very, very effective. Excited about his Urgot, fine Rumble, beautiful Renekton, fantastic Aatrox, you know, all around strong player, you know, good Jace too. Bin, we mentioned, you know, he's sad that Jax doesn't work as well, but he has managed to squeeze a couple of Jax games. There was a game I remember against World Elite specifically where he did a massive comeback, you know, by trapping in a bush in bot side as the enemy was approaching the turret. It was a game where the enemy had like Jhin, Bard, Hui, like a whole composition, and he finds a beautiful engage with a Jax, you know, out of all champions. So in the end, you know, as I mentioned, you know, this is just a question of flavoring these players on the top end here. In a tournament, at the end of it, they can definitely, you know, this can change, you know. We're just evaluating based off of what we've seen in spring and what we expect the meta to be. But the beauty of competition is that, you know, usually, you know, a lot of things can happen. Let's move on to jungle. Jungle. I think two players stand above the rest. I think what they've done so well is that they have been damn consistent. Play both sides of, you know, the supportive role, the carry role. They are capable of picking champions that break the enemy team when necessary. They can adapt to level 3 heavy games. They can adapt to invade heavy games. And I think that they are just the most flexible junglers on this list with a very, very high, you know, standard in terms of mechanics and overall play. Those two guys are Canyon and Shun. So I think the main thing for me, why, you know, if I compare these two, right? I think that I can remember more games where Canyon performed worse than Shun in the regular split. I think Canyon has that series against KT that is a bit haunting. And there's been a couple of moments where maybe Canyon got away with a little bit, but those were like moments where I'd never really judged him as a player. You know, as series progressed, you know, what Canyon did, you know, one of the most gangster things of all time was slamming that Kha'Zix lock-in on match point against T1 against the Xin Zhao, because, you know, in a lot of cases, you know, we are looking there and we are eyeing that series and we're thinking to ourselves, damn, you gotta fucking ban Xin Zhao, and then they open it. And it seems like, damn, they made a mistake here, and then they lock Kha'Zix. And my reaction initially was like, damn, this is not that great. But the owner struggled when he couldn't enter River, and he played against a champion that was so much stronger than him. And owner struggled to connect, and he gave up a lot of freebies. And Kha'Zix really was a monster in this one. So that part of the equation really, really gives Canyon a lot of bonus points in here in my mind. Rel being deleted off the server, of course, matters. Rel is something that, you know, Shun played a lot less. I think that Rel was inherently quite broken in my mind because there was a flex. A flex, you know, people just so everybody understands, like a flex is only useful if it's blindable somewhere. And Rel jungle is pretty damn blindable. Like you could always put Rel jungle. She had good clear speed, good smite contest, good itemization, cheap itemization, functioned well in a low economy game. She just hit the mark on everything that can be important as a jungle. Sure, sometimes you need the carry, but in a lot of cases, Rel fits the bill super good. If you think about the mid laners that were being played, you had the Talia, you had the Aurelion, and you had the Azirs, you had the mages. This is something that Rel thrived and also worked well with, of course, Rumble. And that's something that hurts Rumble, Rel being out of the picture. And Canyon is, of course, a Rel enjoyer, Sejuani enjoyer. And that, we need to estimate here in the equation. I think, Shun, he always has in the back pocket, he has his carry picks, which is the likes of Kindred, really likes Kindred, big Vi player as well. Didn't pull out his Nidalee in this season. We saw a lot of Wukong gameplay, the kind of the meta shaped into kind of this triangle surrounding Wukong, Xin Zhao, and Vi when it came to, of course, the LPL. While in LCK, the jungles prefer just the Sejuanis, the Rel, and of course, occasionally the Maokai too. And the reason is because, just the mid laners, they have, I think mid laners over in the LPL prefer to play the likes of Ari and Nico, while, of course, the LCK mid laners do prefer to play the mages. So it's just a question of things connecting. So as I'm talking out loud about this, I don't really want to knock either player for playing in one specific direction here, right? But Rel being out of the picture, I don't think necessarily I wouldn't be worried about Canyon. Once again, it's just a question of flavoring. And here, I guess, maybe the one thing that makes me want to weigh in here a little bit more is just Shun. If we think about his international experience, I think that he did wonderfully at MSI last year. I think also he had a solid Worlds run, right? I think that in the initial series, Shun was kind of hinting, but then when he picked up the Javan and, he picked up Steam, I think that he had a pretty decent World Championship too. But Canyon, Canyon to me, in my mind, he is the jungle go. He's the jungle go. And the reason is because, I think he really, really understands how much he needs to do in order for the game to be won. I say that from the last very sad Damwon series that we saw, of course, when it came to, his, run against Genji back in 2022. I think his 2023 World Championship was quite uninteresting. I didn't like Canyon at the 2023 World Championship. I think this was just a player that was very hyper-focused on farming, but I feel like he has shed that off of him, And Canyon is a player that deserves my benefit of doubt, so I think these two players are very close. I think that they are very important to their teams. I think that these two guys are by far the strongest junglers in terms of the spring performance and coming into this tournament. Next in line, I would put Owner. I think Owner in spring, he had a stint where he wasn't super effective. I feel like Owner and Korea's performance kind of signals the health of the team. I think that these are players that need to be able to be mechanically expressive. And I think that you notice through Owner and Korea the most when there's glaring flaws in how T1 approaches draft. I think that there was a stint, right, where Owner got subbed out because of being sick, and that they had the issues with, playing a little bit worse than usual in spring, considering the expectations on T1 after the World Championship. Of course, they had some issues, in regards to the DDoS and so forth, and there was some frustrations in practice, but it seems like they figured that out eventually. And I think in the playoffs, Owner did play better and better. I think that he was a very important part in T1's run all the way to, of course, the second place and then taking Genji to 5 games. So the back end of Owner's split, I think, Owner in terms of mechanics, sublime, sublime. I think that he has this extra, sometimes, it happens once, you say, just like it happens 2 times, you say, wow, okay, maybe it's something to pay attention to. It happens 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. This guy manages skill objectives. I think that his awareness around objectives, how he postures on objectives, and how he plays mechanically is super wonderful. And I think that Owner and Faker do a lot of dirty work for T1, but I am not capable of putting him just above here. Something that was strange here about Owner was that I think his Lee Sin, this was like a very rough Lee Sin split for him. He had very, very rough Lee Sin games. I mentioned the Rel, I mentioned the Xin Zhao too, right? I think that he always tries to piece it together for the team in terms of, adding, the tools to a composition that make the composition make sense. And I think Owner and Faker are always needed to do that because Zeus plays his fringe picks, and of course, Kiria plays his fringe picks too. But when all of that works, T1 looks like they can be one of the best teams in the world. They showed that last year, right? When they can enforce this identity, but when they can't, they definitely look worse. But I think that Owner, in general, I think as the playoffs are ramped up, I put Owner here. Tian, Tian is basically Chinese Razork, honestly. I think that Tian has a very high ceiling, but also a very low floor. There's definitely games where you look at Tian and you think to yourself, what on earth is happening? And I think the same can be said for Razork. But these are the two players that I'm following this list up with. I think that when it comes to Jungle, I think that these are the guys. I think that these guys are solid. The main knock on them, right, is like they can have games that maybe match the level of the players above them. Harder to say for Razork, right, because of competition. But I do believe the Jungle is quite tense when it comes to Europe. I think you don't get away with making a lot of bullshit happen in the jungle as a jungler in Europe. You do get punished, and I think that Razork last round at the World Championship was a solid one. Tian maybe less so, but he's back, right? He's back. I do think Tian has had like a solid split, but there are some playoff games that you just remember. It's like, damn, this is quite ugly, and I can't say the same for the likes of Canyon, Shun, maybe Owner's game where he played Xin Zhao against Kha'Zix, but even those mistakes, rather than being like horrible mistakes, I think they were just costly mistakes that, in his condition in those game states, just needed to take some kind of river information and just did the wrong judgment call, while some of the moments of Tian rubbed me the wrong way. In regards to the rest of the pool, I do think that Inspired is better than Umti. Yike is harder to judge, man, because it's like Yike when it comes to just Yike as a player. I do think that his role has been reduced to something so little. In all these lane swap games we saw from G2, his role has been reduced to he has no agency in these games. He just needs to right-click his bot lane and he needs to skip camps and he needs to be ready to dive if the other guy is in isolation. I think he's had some really terrible builds on Rek'Sai. And I remember like a lot of the 3v3s around bottom side were very, very imprecise. So I have not been super impressed with Yike. I don't know if it's a question of game direction because I think that G2, they've tried to restructure how they play this year. And I think they've made the right choice. But I think that Yike got used to a luxury of always having a winning bot lane. But now you have a G2 that is looking to play more scaling champs. And I think that in their precision around the 3v3s, around bottom side, and Yike's early game, I think is more highly exposed. But then I also remember Yike's series, for example, that best of 3 against Fnatic, where they 2-0'd, where he played Volibear. I think that was a very, very solid series. And I think that was the last series where they didn't go on this lane swap bonanza. So the G2 players are, especially Yike here, is a little bit harder for me to judge coming into this tournament. So there's that, I think Umti, I do think that as playoffs ramped up, I think Umti did better and better. But for me, when it comes to Team Liquid and their players, I do think that the sum of them is greater than some of their parts. I think that Team Liquid has managed to figure out how to play together. I think they do a great job of being on the same page. You can see how in tune 5 players are in each decision. When they engage, they do it together. When they fight, they do it together. They collapse on situations together. And I think that makes Team Liquid a very strong and cohesive team. But when I look at a player like Umti, I don't think that he strikes me as a super, super strong jungler. But I repeat, I have watched some of the games in the regular split, and I wasn't too impressed. I think in the ramp up of all of Team Liquid, I do think Umti played better and better in those BO5s against Inspired. I also do think in the last one, he did play better than Inspired. But when I evaluate these two players, I do think Inspired coming into this tournament, I do have a high expectation of. But I could be wrong here. Okay, I think that's where I land on jungle. Keep in mind, order matters, and this is where I land. All right. Is there any additional detail that I missed? I think that I covered everything. We discussed Vi and the rel nerf, Vi being OP, and so forth. Okay. It is interesting when it comes to jungle, though, like how different Owner and Canyon have had to play due to the mid laners the mid lane champions that are just being preferred in China, right? Knight really loves to play Ari, really loves to play Nico, right? If you think of what CHOVY played so far, he hasn't been playing these champions as actively. And that, of course, like warps the jungle pool. You can see Tian has been playing 12 Lee Sin games, 12 Xin Zhao games, mostly AD jungles, right? While, of course, Owner and our homie Canyon has played mostly some of the tank jungles. But I don't worry about any of these players having issues with champion pool. It's just a question of, filling a specific role for the team. All right, mid lane. This one is exciting, I think in the mid lane we do have like potentially the the 3 best players at the tournament. We might just have them here. This is always a funky one, because I think people are gonna fast forward to this one and see what's up. CHOVY, I've said this multiple times, and I do think that he is the best player coming into this tournament. We're not making any top 10 list. It's going to be quite obvious. Maybe it's something that we squeeze in at the end of the video, unless this goes on for way too long. Basically, 10 CS per minute, insane. Not the main thing I wanted to hammer home, but CHOVY has found a way to outdo himself, right? The key thing here, right? You will see the main thing that is different is the Nico, the Ari is something that is less played, a road less traveled when it comes to, of course, the LCK. The Aussie games, very memorable. I think Genji as a team, such a wonderful way of rallying around package and understanding package. I think Genji in terms of macro really understand and trust CHOVY in his decision making, give him the space to carry games when it comes to the economical side, because they know he will execute, of course, the mechanical side. I think the most impressive thing about CHOVY's growth is that I think that he is so instinctually good at finding the game-breaking decision when it comes to fights, because CHOVY was always an immaculate laner, always an immaculate side laner in terms of generating gold. These are things that he was always like the best at. The main thing that was missing was how clutch he was in fights, how he broke fights, like the FAKER aspect of like what, for example, what FAKER did last year at the Worlds, and additionally like how he manages to impact the map in regards to, understanding economy through others. And this is something that I believe now CHOVY has added. I think coming into this tournament, CHOVY is the greatest player at this tournament. I think last year at Worlds he played well. I think that his MSI was quite tragic. He got annihilated by Yagao. Like his Lissandra, Annie, didn't play any Nautilus. That is where maybe CHOVY is yet to be tested, of course, but we're heading into a meta where we are going to play Azir. We are going to see Aurelion Sol. We are going to see Talia still. We are going to see Koki. And I do think that this is where CHOVY does well. The main thing that maybe he's lacking is, of course, the Nico. His Ahri is still super, super good, but this is like the edge that Knight has. But what Knight is lacking is his Azir gameplay doesn't look as sharp, and his Aurelion Sol looks fucking wonky. Like that's the trade-off, right? So CHOVY for me is number one. Number two is just it's like in my mind, I think Knight has had a wonderful, very, very fucking impressive split. His finals, if you are a person that makes a tier list by only watching finals, then maybe you look at Knight and you think, oh. But for those who know, they know that his Azir is not one of his strongest champs, and Aurelion Sol, he basically first time Aurelion Sol in that finals. And I don't want to make excuses for that because in essence, those are very important champions, especially coming into this MSI. So this is something we need to pay attention to because Knight better fucking put in the time to master these champs. But as mentioned before, Knight can create very interesting jungle pairings together with Shun, with the Nico and the Ahri and the AD jungles. And I think that with Rel out, this is going to be even more prevalent, right? The Xin Zhao, the Lee Sins, and the Wukongs and the Vais are going to be very, very active. So we're going to see how CHOVY, of course, evolves in that, So that's going to be interesting. But CHOVY has a great Ahri too, but Knight Ahri is, of course, legendary. If we pull up his Ahri stats, 7 and 0. Historically, I think it's something completely crazy. If I just show you guys his Ahri, that is orgasmic. But all the time when you look at players with their statistics, it's absolutely crazy what kind of longevity these mid laners have had, right? These mid laners have had crazy, crazy longevity. The next one in line for me is, of course, FAKER. I think FAKER has had a very strong split. I think the main, FAKER has to serve a very specific role on his team. He does a lot of dirty work, I think. I don't think he gets a lot of jungle attention. I don't think he gets a lot of support attention either. And I think that he maneuvers himself around that super, super well. I think that FAKER as a player needs to do a lot with little. And that's the role that he serves on this team. It's like Zeus is a player that wants to carry the games, and Keria is the support that also want to carry games in one shape or form. And you need to have players that create that space, and I think FAKER does that marvelously. When we look at his World Championship performance, right, like he was the best mid laner at that World Championship, right? And when it comes to ramping up for these tournaments, he always does super, super well. I do think in the finals, CHOVY was the better player, but that's been true for many, many finals, like the last 4 in my mind. And always when it comes to walking into these tournaments, CHOVY does look like the better player, but FAKER is a player that manages to find form, And I said at the beginning that I want to just, talk about like the intangibles, but I do have to, still create some level of separation because I think CHOVY and Knight has had splits that are truly, truly, truly tremendous, And I think that FAKER, very important to the team and has a capacity to do really fucking good at MSI. I do think he is one notch below these two. But I think if I elaborate in my mind about a top 10 list in terms of players, I instinctively right now in this moment, I would probably put FAKER third. But that's tied to the fact that I do believe mid lane as a role is a very difficult one to play. And to play at the highest level, I do think that I just rate in terms of how good people are and players are as just players, I rate mid lane as just higher. Next in line, this is where things pivot. I will put Caps above Cream. I'll put Caps above Cream. Caps has been insane winter and spring. The main thing for Caps, right, as a player, why I can't put him here or move him up, is just that the resistance in mid lane is not that high. I think Caps, in terms of mechanical skill, in terms of champion pool, right, when it comes to Caps, he covers everything. He covers the Nico side super well, he covers the Thalia side, played LB games, Azir games. He's such a fucking complete player. Aurelion Sol, he pops off. He plays it all. When it comes to champion pool, I do think that Caps is the one that has the most effective one, right? But is it effective against this level of play? That's the big question, right? Last time we saw Caps at the World Championship, he did have good Orianna games, but then when he played against CHOVY, he was suffering, right? He had a fine Tristana game, but the second game was like, oof, he got annihilated very quick, right? We had the lane swap games that they played. I do think that Caps has literally 1v9 a lot of games for G2 in this split. And I do think that Caps is a very, very strong player. But I am saying all of these things in the context of what the LEC is. And I don't think Caps could have done a lot more in the LEC for me to push him higher here. The eye test, I think, is doing super, super well. But the main question is, in terms of lane phase, the pacing of the early game, how will Caps fare against the likes of the people above him? I do think that Caps has good instinct for macro understanding in terms of farm distribution. Very, very good champion pool. The lane phase is the big question for me when it comes to the extension of playing against the players that are above him. I can definitely see an argument to push Caps higher. And maybe in some shape or form, like there's a question of just doing this instead, because putting Caps B feels kind of wrong, because in the same way putting Faker A feels wrong. I think like these brackets here are closer, right? Right next to Caps, I will put Cream. Cream is heading into his first international tournament. He's playing against players that have very big experience if we're thinking about the comparison. Cream against these guys. Cream is a player that I got very excited by through our Dominate. Watching OMG last year, he had insane LeBlanc games, insane Akali games, Kai'Sa games. Like he just mechanically executed, played sides super well, understood the farm game, and really, really grew from a player that only plays melees to a player that is pulling Ahri bans. Right? I think Cream is a very, very strong player, but I think against Knight, he looked rather ineffective. And the main question for me is, what is the extension of Cream in the current meta? When it comes to Cream, his Azir, I don't think it's super impressive. I think his Ahri and Hui games are the ones that stand out the most. But lacking Thalia, he played Thalia one game in the finals, didn't look that great. I think that he's coming in a tournament where maybe his pool isn't the greatest. But then again, Hui got a little cheeky buff, and I think his Hui is really fucking good. His Hui, Akali, and Ahri are the champions that I think of when I think of him. Also Tristana. Tristana is something that I for sure should mention. But when I think of what I expect the mid lane meta to be, I'm thinking Aurelion Sol, Azir, fucking Thalia. I still think these three champions are demons. The question is, can Cream now break through? Mechanically, super talented player, but I think it will be challenging for him to break into here. And the question is, how will he adjust his first international tournament? And these are the moments for a player like Cream to really, really make a mark. And next one in line, I will just put Humanoid here. Humanoid, very high ceiling, very low floor. I think when it comes to international tournaments, Humanoid is someone that reacts well. The main question for me, right, is just Fnatic had no bootcamp time. No bootcamp time. I understand that Riot sent them quite late. All the other teams that traveled earlier did it on their own dime, and they made partnerships with teams to bootcamp with. I don't know the conditions of Fnatic. All I know is that they practice super, super little. So I don't know what to expect from Fnatic at this tournament. I don't know if they're going to go so far to bomb against something else. Finally, the NA mid laners, I think APA, is coming into this tournament. Aurelion Sol is a very valid champ. He has the Ziggs. He has a very strong Thalia. But in regards to seeing Jensen or APA play against any of these players above them, they are definitely, you know, heavy underdogs. Heavy underdogs. Jensen, of course, has a lot of international experience, but I think it's in terms of tapping into that and talking about the impact of that, I think it's rather, you know, that tap has dried out in my mind. So good to see Jensen back, right? But the mid lane is very stacked in this tournament. And, you know, it is what it is. You know, it is what it is. I am excited for mid lane. All right. Is there anything to highlight? I guess Faker's Orianna is something that's going to be permabanned. I talked about earlier on Sol, Talia, and of course, Azir being core champions. Orianna is also a super important champion that will take a lot of bans. Another champion, the Cream, most likely won't want to play. Jensen, of course, the Orianna player. And Azir was something that was disabled during playoffs in, of course, the LCS. So that's, of course, something that hurt Jensen. But Jensen likes Azir on the Orianna. But Faker on Orianna and Talia is super, super exciting. Also a player, I think Faker is a player that has that range, you know, that I mentioned when it came to, of course, the mid lane pull, when I mentioned the caps. Still, you know, Faker has been spamming a lot of Aurelion Sol and solo queue, is something that I saw. So I'm excited to see that development, you know, how well have mid laners caught up to the Aurelion Sol gameplay and all of these champions to slot in, or is there a layer that maybe I'm missing in regards to champions that people can be picking to break everything? Maybe suddenly LeBlanc is OP because of the change, and maybe I misjudge it. I am not privy to those scrims besides the ones that Team Liquid leaked, and you know, Team Liquid and G2 leaked, and in there was a Caps playing LB, so you know, there's that. But LB, you know, all these players are Demon LeBlancs. CHOVY, Demon LeBlanc, Knight, Demon LeBlanc. You know, these are guys that are great at LeBlanc, and of course, Caps 2 and Faker 2 and Cream 2. So either way, all of them will be fine if that turns out to be the meta game. All right, I think we've covered mid lane. Super exciting stuff. Let's have a chat. So keep in mind, guys, you're getting a direct plug into my brain, you know, and I'm just giving you guys my flow of thoughts. And I repeat this because obviously my list is biased, and this is my list, you know. This isn't like a prediction of who is going to do better than who. This is more like an assessment of everything we've seen and, you know, evaluating intangibles, because, you know, at the end of the tournament, people are going to have breakthrough performances that are going to help us judge them coming into summer. And that's the beauty of competition. Performance goes up and it goes down, and maybe if someone has food poisoning, or maybe someone gets hit by a car, or maybe someone's girlfriend broke up with them and they play worse, or maybe sometimes they even play better. You know, it's fun because the human aspect has a way of making itself show through. This as well, right? This moment here on your screen, I think that we do have another S plus and S situation here, right? I think the main man is Elkovic. Elkovic, you know, when it comes to his gameplay, I think that it's been the most well-rounded. I think his Caitlyn games are kind of an interesting, but he had that monster Lucian game that you guys saw. That's a fucking crazy Kalista, crazy Varus. His gameplay, you know, I think a big benefit as well. He's probably playing with the best support at this tournament too. This bot lane as a duo is just monstrous, tremendous, absolutely tremendous. And I think in this evaluation of AD carries, a big part of that is also like the support that they're paired with and the limitations that sometimes give them. But I think ELK is the most well-rounded. I could see a world where if some things pivot towards maybe a Jinx and an Aphelios side or a Senna side, I do feel like this is a player that is ready for absolutely anything. I'm not worried about any draft evolution or any bans that might occur or even lane swap situations. I think this is just a bot lane that is so well-rounded, because I think that ELK and On can do it both. They can play these killer bot lanes with the Nikos and the Rumbles and the Ashe and the Kalistas and the Varus, and they can play the scaling lanes with the Lucian Nami and the Zaya Rakans and the Jinx, and they can also play the lane swap situations and the Sennas. This is just, currently, they are the bot lane to beat. You know, they are the bot lane to crack, right? The next one in line, besides, of course, ELK, the next one in line for me is like Gumayusi and Jakilov. It's either it's to to put these guys in order is what is funny. I feel like they are so similar as players. They are so damn similar. If we take a look at what Gumayusi, slams, he had that Senna run with the Senna Tom where they were just fucking winning game after game after game after game. Senna Tom, then all of a sudden, Genji figured out we just could ban Tom Kench on red side. They don't want to play Nautilus. And that all of a sudden their Senna is weaker. We get Nautilus. That's something that How Alive did too, right? In the first series where they beat them, right? This is where they got attacked. They have a strong Lucian, but this Lucian was, a lot of the games were played during the double support item era of Milio, Lucian Milio, because this is something that, of course, T1 was very early on. And then, of course, the Varus, he has a mean fucking Varus, and the same thing for Kalista. But anything beyond that, that is where I begin to worry about, of course, T1. The reason I don't necessarily put the blame on Gumayusi for that, I do think that Korea is a very, very eccentric player. But we are going to get into that more when we evaluate supports. Jakilov, if we look at the top 4 champions, it's practically the fucking same thing, right? Sure, you can say that it's the same thing for this guy over here too, right? To some degree. But I think the main point I'm trying to make when it comes to Gumayusi and Jakilov, I think these are the situations where they look their best. Varus, Lucian, Senna, and then, of course, Draven. I think Draven, Varus, Kalista, they all have this one thing in common, is that they should be paired with supports that are designed to just win lane as hard as possible. But I imagine that coming into MSI, that teams might be less keen to play them due to the nature of lane swap being a thing that everybody's aware of. But nevertheless, Gumayusi versus Jakilov, I think that Gumayusi, I think he's in my mind, I look back at T1, and even when T1 was at their worst, Gumayusi, and of course, this is my opinion, I feel like Gumayusi has been like the most consistent player over the last couple of years when it comes to T1. I think that Gumayusi has some glaring mistakes where he loses summoners or dies on mid-wave that people can point to. But I'm just looking at his whole volume and body of play. I think that he needs to play very winning ADs in order to really, supply Korea and Owner with what they need. You guys remember all of those matches where they got dove on bot last year at MSI because they didn't have winning matchups. And when Korea is not playing winning matchups, like there was this one game they played Draven and Poppy, and the Poppy was completely useless because they're not winning. And I think that Gumayusi needs to play the AD to really make sure that Korea can express himself through the game. I don't want to see Korea on Rakan or Nautilus, right? The standard supports where other supports are, really effective on. I'm talking about all of this, right? When it comes to Gumayusi versus Jakilov, I think we can put them up here, right? I think that there is going to be games where Guma and Jakilov perform just as good as ELK. I just think that it's more likely that ELK has those great games due to his effective pool and his pairing with On right now. It just happens to be that ELK and On as a bot lane, are performing super good, All of a sudden, Gumayusi, if Gumayusi and Korea manage to figure out the meta, all of a sudden they fly up again, right? So that's a part of the equation here. But I would say I would want to lean into Jackie a little bit more here. I think that he squeezes just a little bit better when it comes to fights. I recall more moments where he did the game deciding, move better or for worse. And I have to give Jackie a little bit more here. It is interesting that probably the best bot lane in the LCK is not coming to this tournament, right? not coming to this tournament. That is, of course, Viper and the Light. But that's a conversation for a different moment. Right now, I'll keep it at that. Next one in line for me is FAZE. FAZE, I think FAZE has had some fine games, but for the majority of things, I often feel like he's a passenger of his top side. And I think the same can be said to Lehens on occasion. Lehens is a player that has been very up and down. I think, FAZE does not belong in the conversation of the other three right now. There's that. I think that FAZE has good Aphelios. He has a decent Zeri. I think that his Lucian is very meh in comparison to the other Lucians on this board. I think the same thing can be said for his Senna. Yeah, I think that's that. I do think in the regular season, the best of 5, best of 3 that they played against Our Life, I think it was a very good series for Lehens and FaZe. So they definitely have it in them, right? But right now, I don't think FaZe has done enough in terms of, finding game impact through, of course, the important things that I mentioned, the team fighting, the setup around it, the macro understanding, and just, AD, like I always have this conversation. It's like I always say the same thing. Maybe you hear this for the 50th time. AD carries, when you press tab and you see them finishing items, how scared of them are you as they complete them? How suffocating is it that this AD has completed items? And I think that FaZe right now, it's like people press tab, they look at CHOVY when it comes to Genji. People press tab, they pay attention to Gumang, Jackie, and ELK, And ELK the most right now, Next in line, I think Han Sama, Han Sama, it's borderline that we need to do something like this. I think, I've had the opinion that AD gap is something that is quite great when it comes to West against East. I do think that Han Sama and Noah, I do think that they are thinking right about the game. There's this Carsy-esque trait about the willingness to risk to gain more in terms of squeezing out of your champion, in terms of pushing the limits of your champion. And I think that I can see the adjustment in the mindset in both Han Sama and Noah when it comes to this department. I just think I can borderline even do this, man. Honestly, this is probably a more fair assessment, I just think that these three are just kind of fucking demons, but I think this is more fair. Honestly. I think FaZe is closer to these guys than he is to these guys. Honestly, we can do that. We can do that. Angel, not right now. I'm in a video, please. Han Sama, Noah, what was I saying? So I think that they've made, like Noah specifically, I think that he was the biggest KDA player, and then all of a sudden he took more risks. And in that process of taking more risks, he did look like a goofball. But then eventually it led to somewhere. And Noah did better and better and better. And I think that's good. That's the right mindset. That's the main reason why I'm so excited for Kalist. Like Kalist as a player, I'm excited for him because he's playing in a way that is going to eventually put him in high places. He is squeezing. He's an AD that pushes forward. He's an AD that is willing to invite the spells that he needs to be scared of. Because in terms of team fighting, right, you have your range and you have your abilities, your flash. There are certain things that you have to flash, like enemy flash, and you play around it, right? When you leverage your movement in order to invite abilities that might break you, when you have that level of confidence, you're doing a really good job. Some AD carries, when they see a Syndra on the enemy team, they think Syndra stun range, our range is me. So as long as Syndra has stun, I cannot play the game. The better ADs are going to look to posture towards the Syndra if they are strong. They're going to invite, they're going to look to use the movement to create space for themselves. the greatest AD carries to touch the game are AD carries that engage and provoke fights. Engaging isn't necessarily just, wow, I hit a Nautilus hook, a CC on a key target. No, no, no. Engaging is posturing forward enough to provoke the enemy to engage on you. That is a form of engagement too. And all of these guys, they know how to do it. Sometimes they look dumb doing it. But I would rather have them take that risk in pursuing so much more than being the timid player that doesn't. And I think that there's an evolution here in Hansama and Noah towards that side. Maybe I go so far to put Hansama in his own tier. I do think Hansama deserves that. He pulls bans, he has a very wide champion pool. Noah is growing. I think Yeon and Masu, I think that they are passengers around them in regards to their team. I do think that they have some champions that they stand out on. Like Masu Kalista look pretty decent, Yeon Varus, but I don't think that they are in the same conversation just yet. So I will put the Noah right to Hansama because I think he's closer to Hans than he is to Yeon and Masu. All right, that's AD carry for you. I think, I've mentioned this many times, but I do think if you're playing against T1, probably you should think about how to prepare lane swaps. Because I think you want Zeus to have shit economy and you want T1's bot lane to be away from lane. So it'll be interesting to see how they maneuver around that. I'm really, really curious to see that unfold. Really, really curious. Okay. And now for support. Ladies and gentlemen. Support. I already talked about it on can do it all. He has probably the best Rakan at the tournament. His Nami Lucian together with his boy is insane. His Renata is tremendous. Milio is an extension of course, Lucian. Nautilus in this case is fucking fantastic. The Caitlyn Lux, I think Caitlyn Lux is just piss weak. They try to play it because their AD enjoys it, but I don't think it's good. Probably the strongest Lulu player as well, like Shun and ELK and On. They are the guys that dove every motherfucking bot lane at MSI. After getting dove by JDG bot lane over and over again, they mastered it and fucking shoved it down the throats of Genji and of course T1. So this is a player that is so damn well rounded. He can play it all and he does it at a damn high level. Had a fine Camille, he had a strong Camille, better Camille performance than Korea, I would say. Korea would fucking air and shit like this. Had a really, really good Nico performance too. Of course, in the finals against Top Esports, very memorable Nico performance. Every fucking engage was 3-man, 4-man. I think Nico support is pretty fucking broken, I'm not gonna lie. I think it's giga broken. But my main point is, it's hard for me to think of a flaw when it comes to On right now. Very difficult. Very, very difficult for me to think of a flaw when it comes to On. I think On is just insane. He's just straight up insane. I have a hard time thinking about flow when it comes to On. And that extends, of course, to the AD tier list, right? ELK is playing with On and ELK is fucking delivering. ELK is fucking the best performing AD globally, probably right now, I think there's a lot to be said as well in regards to going through the demon AD carries that are, of course, available in China, Ruler. Wow. There it is. On number 1. And now we continue. I think that, I discussed Korea a lot. Just to summarize it now, because we talk about support, I think Korea is a mechanical talent. Mechanical talent, supreme mechanical talent. I do think when Korea plays the standard supports, like Nautilus, Rakan, I don't like it. I really don't like it. And these are champions that are still going to be strong coming into the tournament, right? I think that he looks at his best when he plays Ashe, when he plays his fucking demon Tahm Kench, His Renata is a classic too, right? For some godforsaken reason, they were playing Sejuani and Sion, Botlane, because they required tanks, right? And our life was smart enough to, of course, target Banto Orn in those cases, right? He's playing like a wide range of champions to pair together with the Senna because they don't want to play Nautilus. So basically, in most draft cases, teams first pick Nautilus when Tampkench gets banned on 3, but they first pick Senna and choose to pick Ornn into it. I think his Ornn is fine, his Sion is dirty, and his, of course, Sejuani, I am not a big fan of, right? Just trying to solve the situation the best way they can. I think his Rumble is solid. I think that his Nico is good. I think he has some goofy supports that he played on occasion, right? Like the fucking Hui or the fucking Ezreal, that I don't think are that good. But we know that Thresh is something that has gotten buffs. I imagine that, as a Thresh player, he's going to be fucking wonderful, right? I think the same thing can be said for Mako. So to stop myself from rambling, the main thing for me, I think that Kiria, when he has the freedom to break the game through bot lane by picking some niche pick that is going to win the matchup, or pick a champion that scales super well and still lanes well. I think he does well when he passes to play standard supports. And the lane matchups is more balanced, and it's a question of how well you work together with your jungle. Those are the moments I'm scared. And I think that's an indictment on Korea, right? That's just Korea and owner and their biggest issue. In those metas where blind picking Nautilus, picking Rakan, playing Lulu is the best thing you can do out of support, and they don't have the capacity to break that, that's where they look the weakest. And there is a chance that we're going into a tournament where that's going to be true too, right? There is a chance where we are going into a tournament and that might still be true. Okay. So Korea, I'll put him here. Mako, I think that Mako is solid all around. I think that he has had a great split. Mako for me is like the GOAT of supports due to his longevity, right? Keep in mind, Mako was on the EDG roster that beat FAKER at MSI 2015. And then he won Worlds 2021. And now he's here again at MSI after so many years of competing at the highest fucking level. And making this resurgence after last year of playing together with Uzi and not qualifying to the World Championship and now being here at MSI, Mako is a very, very strong player. I think that he's also very, very well-rounded, but he just happens to do things in terms of the mechanical output just a little bit worse, I think, than on. I do think that he is a little bit more well-rounded than Korea when it comes to being playing Nautilus and the likes of Rakan is something that he's not super keen on. Thresh is something that they share. Mako and of course Korea. So now the question is like, do I have the expectation that the more vibrant supports are being played? Then I prefer Korea. If things are going to be a little bit more standard, I think that Mako is going to do a little bit better, but are not enough better for me to justify putting Mako over Korea. I still think Nico's support is fucking broken. So it's like, I think that's something that they will pull as a ban naturally. I think Korea, every game he can, should lock in Nico. I think that's true for anyone at this tournament. I think Rumble support is interesting in some cases, but they need to be very wary of course, lane swap angles. That shit is going to be very curious. Next in line, I do think that Lehens is just a step below. I think that Lehens has games where he's up here, but he definitely has games where he shouldn't be up here. And sometimes that can be said for Korea too, right? That can be said for Korea too. It's like, I think that Korea has games where he can perform at 100%. Lehens has games where he performs at the 95%. And I feel like Mako keeps like a steady 80%, right? But Korea and Lehens definitely have like lower floors, in my opinion, right? I think Mako is consistent and Korea and Lehens carry more higher highs. I think it's fair to put Lehens up here. I don't think that it's extreme enough to put him next to Mickey and Jun. The main question, right, is if you look at Mickey as a player, do you expect him to shape up, right? I think that a big part of the criticism, like if you guys haven't seen it, you should check out the Voice of Yamato I did with Mickey. I think a big part of the criticism is just that in the year where Mickey got MVP, I think the G2 was designed in a way where Mickey had a lot of agency. When you're winning bot, supports have immense agency. And now they've switched that around. And I think the main knock towards them is that the more even 3v3s they have on bottom side, or when they have to defend, I think they are not as sharp with jungle and support. Having a winning bot lane really gives you so much freedom. We talked about this extensively when it comes to Owner, of course, too, right? But I think the same thing happened to YAIK, right? And I think that in regards to what his split was, I think that G2 has built a greater understanding on how to play deeper macro games, which I think is a massive plus. They've made the right sacrifices, but I think a part of the criticisms towards Mickey is also tied to the comparison of last year. And last year, G2 played different than they did this year. It's very important to remember that. They still have the Draven in the back pocket, but in terms of how they approach macro and how they extend themselves across the map is very different. And that makes Mickey in the support role not have as much agency, you know? It's very important, the details of what he does. He doesn't have freedom, right? Last year, he was saving wave states top. He was saving mid. He was dominating bottom side, invading with YAIK. He was fucking everywhere. He was everywhere. But that was because they were playing Ashe Heimerdinger, Varus Heimerdinger, Varus lanes. They were playing Samira Jarvan lanes. They were playing fucking... they were playing Draven, Kalista, you know, they went all in this identity of domination, right? So, am I willing to put Mickey higher? I think at this moment in time, it's hard for me to do so. It's hard for me to do so. But I will put him above June, even though I think June, in my opinion, had a better spring split than Mickey. Just to make it clear. I value Mickey's experience here. And I value the fact that Mickey has, at his best, and that has been many years, been able to compete even as soon and as early as last year's World Championship. CHOVY, Busio, you know, I feel bad. You know, I have to admit, like, when it comes to evaluating the TL and the FlyQuest players, maybe I am brushing them under a rug too hard, too fast. But I do think that TL and TL is just, in terms of their decision making, it's very obvious that CHOVY and Impact has a wonderful fucking influence on this team. You know, this is a team that is brimming of leadership, I feel like. It's a very well coached team. In the world where I'm rating them individually, it's hard for me to put them as high, you know? And maybe it's just a question of me not watching enough LCS, and I can admit that this is something that can be wrong, right? But we'll have to see, you know? We'll have to see. So there's that. Because LSE in spring was awful, like in terms of level. Maybe LSE is just gonna straight up fucking bomb, you know? But we continue. I think, with that being said, I think that we covered it all. I don't know if I should do like a spontaneous top 10 playlist here, based off of all of the things that I've mentioned. Like maybe it's something that I can just do because people are curious about it. I would put CHOVY first. I would put Knight second. FAKER is definitely in my top 5, so I'm just going to pull him up. I think Canyon belongs, 369 belongs, On belongs, ELK belongs. Let me see who else is here. Let me see who else is here. Who else should be here? I think that, you know, maybe you can make an argument for like Korea. Let me see, Korea, Zeus, Owner, Guma. Keen should probably be up there. There's a team that is being forgotten here, no? There's one. Oh, okay, never mind. I'm just mixing top esports and T1. That's why something was missing. Probably like Jackie, you know. It's like probably it's something like I just love Midlane, bro. I just love Midlane. We'll probably put Shun. We have 9. Let's see. Let me just throw a little. I don't remember who I put above who. I put Jackie Love ahead, right? It's funny because straight up, it's like the T1 players are all like they are all there, right below 10 in my opinion. I like someone said like someone's they are right below there, you know. It's a combination. It's something like this, you know. It's like 369, and then it's like fucking let's put on there, and then let's put Canyon, Shun, ELK, Jackie, Keen. But then it's like the T1 players is like 11, 12, 13, 14. It's something like this, you know. Like I legit would do something like this, you know, like maybe bin somewhere in between, you know, bin somewhere here, something like this, you know. Like this would be a very fair top 15 in my opinion, you know, left to right, of course. Something like that. Of course, I cook this up in just like that. You know, I do it because at the end of the tournament, all the T1 homies, the fans of all of these players come back to this to comment. So I'm doing it to drive meaningless interaction. Yes, I'm a businessman now. All right, I think we covered it all. We covered it all. Trying to think if there's anything else to do, anything else to include. Is there anything else to include? I don't think so. I don't think so. I do not think so. Something like this, I think. Boom. Maybe we'll do it like that. Yeah. Thank you very much. If you sneeze during this video, bless you and bless your face. I catch you on the flip. Yes. Yes. No one ever makes it to the end of the video, so I can just say my PIN code and my bank, MasterCard, and bunch of crazy shit like that. I'm gonna go stream MSI. I'm excited. Yeah, I'll wrap up the video. I'm going crazy here. I went bowling today. I went like shit, man. I think whoever like buffered, like polished, just made it so slippery, bro. I slipped every time when I tried to bowl, and always it's like you can kind of know. Honestly, what am I talking about? I'm ending the video.